Hello. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through the what I've considered the most creative way to show somebody falling in love that I've ever seen articulated in a film. Now, things to understand about film is what's so marvelous about the art form is that, um, excuse me, it's the closest thing we have from taking the pictures in our heads and our thoughts and translating them into the material world, into the material plane. Now, what happens in that translation that's fascinating, besides that, is that you're translating onto a two-dimensional surface, untouchable. It's a projection. So it's the closest thing we have to projecting thoughts to one another. Now, the question of metaphysics is how do you replicate what's in your head with all the material dimensions of the celluloid and the lights and the sound to make meaning to the viewer who gets just a projection of what was in your mind. That's why filmmakers are always disappointed with the way things come out, especially when you first start, because they never look like you imagine them to, and that's just because you don't have the skills yet. A lot of what I'm teaching in this class is how to have the skills, to have the vocabulary, to know the visual syntax. And so if you know that, then you can use the conventions, the vowels, and you can make visual sentences that make sense. Because film is pictures, show me, don't tell me. So you have to be able to tell the story without sound. And if you're doing that, then you're pretty much doing a great job. Alright, so I put this online earlier. This is the scene where Oscar Wilde meets Bosie, but now I'm going to break it down for you. Okay, so the first thing I want to look at here is, okay, so top of the scene. Look at the framing. There's it's close up of heads, but look at where the heads are in the frame. They're on the top, the eyes are on the top third. What that does, it tells the brain that you are in the room with these people because you're at eye level with them. The brain understands the frame, this frame of the film, as the eye. So we're closer to something, we're more intimate with it. So here you see that you're close and you're eye level. Their heads are just hitting the top of, that's exactly what you would see if you were looking. There's a point in your peripheral vision where you stop seeing. For those of you who are more ambitious philosophically, something that's not yet been answered in the world of film theory is what in the world is happening outside of the frame. Your mind calibrates for it and adjusts for it and extends the frame for you as you're watching. But really think about it. Where does this room really end? You don't know. We don't know the answer to that question yet. We don't know what the mind does for us. But anyway, so here we are. We're entering the room, and we are at eye level, so we're at the party, in other words. Okay? And now, interestingly, look what happens. So we have the interior framing right here, these two pillars. These two men's heads work as pillars on the outside thirds of the frame, just like the columns do in the Social Network, where the internal frame makes the framing. So here, these heads are actually making room, and then this guy enters. Now, this guy we know is an important character. How do we know that? A, they're stagnant. He enters the frame. He enters on the z-axis forward. So he's coming at you, per se, as the viewer in the room. You'd be standing right here, in other words. And the way they set that up was to have a lead-in. So here's the lead. So there's the frame. Okay? This guy, has just walked across the frame. What that does is like a curtain revealing. And so his motion vector reveals, the curtain opens, and then the main character framed in the center, the only face facing us, no other face comes directly at us. Now our mind has associated importance with this character by just doing that one particular internal swipe. It's an internal swipe. Ready? There's nothing here. It's a vacancy. But there is something that's going to come, obviously. So there's the vacancy. Guy walks across it. pulls him along on the tail. There we go. Now watch. Was I right? Yes. The camera follows for the first time now. You started at a stationary camera. When this guy comes into your life, you follow him. So that means you're watching him in the room at eye level. This guy's not looking at you. We got the full face. He's moving. The motion vector is left to right. Okay, how would I just do? Really, Christy? Is that what you just did? Alright. Okay, open up. Okay, he's moving left to right. There we go, okay? He's going to come on an arc, on the 180-degree arc. Okay? So what he's done is, when you think about the frame, and remember this is a two-dimensional thing, what we're trying to do is convince the mind that it's three-dimensional. And in that third dimension is the spherical nature of this, just like life itself, right? Three-dimensional. So we're tricking the mind with lighting and focus. What he's done is, you think of the frame as 180 degrees, as opposed to 360. So he's walked on the 180-degree line up to the camera and around with his motion vector. So we've seen him come in, and now we're seeing the back of his head, but we're still with him, okay? Now, also notice the shallow depth of field. Remember, what's in the foreground is in focus. That tells us that's what's important. What's in the background is not in focus. It's not information that you need to know. It just helps the mind hook onto the important information by framing it and working with the depth of field. You quickly give us a dominant image and therefore meaning. So let's watch from the top. So there he comes. He cuts across. We follow him. Once his head hits the bottom third, the camera begins to tilt up. Watch this camera work. He enters, and then the camera tilts up, okay? So what he's gonna do now is he's in the very center of the frame. And if you'll notice, there's an interior frame right here. In other words, an arrow. And it's just working to just drive your eye right here to keep your eye away from all of this extra collateral damage. So he gets the vertical vectors, and he anchors the picture, and then the point of view tilts up, allowing more information in while holding us down with the anchor so we don't lose the meaning. Okay. Now we have the same thing. The people walk through. Okay. So now look at this interesting framing here. We've got this wall and this wall. And look what happens right here at the first third, just like in Social Network. Right there is the vertical frame on the first third. What does that do? This part becomes unimportant. And just like in Social Network, there's no frame here. It goes out into space. But what they did was they put a light, okay, so that anchors the frame, and then darkness behind the light to suggest depth. So what this becomes, these 2/3 of the frame, remember the anchor was here, here he is, tilting up, and so it's allowing for, so what happens is the frame goes up and opens, which is dynamic. He goes in, this opens, and then the motion vectors, they're going to meet like that. And that's going to tell you, your brain, what's important. There's Oscar. Okay? So look what they did here. 2/3 of the frame are unimportant. Our anchor and Oscar are exactly in line with each other. Here's the arrows here, the vertical arrows here, framing the important information. Okay, now we're going to make space for the men. There we go. Okay, so we had the interaction, and then now, why would they cut? Why would they cut to a close-up? I'll tell you in the next video.